Hey guys, so today we're going to have a little chat about something that I normally come across a lot on forums and websites related to gang stalking and targeted individuals, okay? And that is the question of how long is the gang stalking actually going to last? Many people can tell you that gang stalking is something that targeted individuals seem to say lasts a very long time, many years. Very few cases that I've come across that have stated that, for example, it went on for like a short duration of 1 or 2 years and then it stopped. Very few. Okay, so number one, the idea is that your gang stalkers sometimes have been watching you way before or way in advance of when you actually recognize that they are stalking you or that they are, targeting you. Some people are actually born into families where their own parents are handlers, okay? They're spiritual handlers. You don't realize this until something happens in your life or, you just start awakening. When you start awakening is when you recognize, you start to notice the synchronicities, you start to notice, like all of these things. Now, the whole idea is that because you are awakening, the only difference is that what these entities do, let's call them entities, they give you a narrative. They feed you some kind of narrative that makes it plausible for the reason why you're being gang stalked, okay? So that it makes some kind of sense so that you really believe it, so that you focus on it. But in reality, the real reason is that you're awakening to all of the illusions of the Matrix. And in an attempt to kind of keep you distracted, the gang stalking begins. It's kind of like a resistance to your, to your progress and to your development, your spiritual development, okay? So, for example, in my case, I, up until a certain time, thought that my gang stalking originally started in 2020, okay? And 2020 was the big pandemic and all of this was going on, right? So a lot of things were going on spiritually in that time period, but that is when the actual, I would say, gang stalking was made apparent to me. But at the same time, again, that was a time where there was a lot of spiritual stuff going on. So it might have also been that I was becoming more observant. I was awakening more. And therefore, this was the attempt, or this was something that was implemented to slow it down. To slow down my focus, my spiritual development, etc. It was meant to keep me now focused on A, B, and C, whatever the narratives were, to have me in a state of fear, in confusion, and etc. Okay? When I started to learn a little bit more about the dynamics of this world that we live in, and why gang stalking happens, etc., etc., and I started to sit down and really reflect, like really do a deep reflection of every person I've come across in my life and every incident that happened, every experience that I've had with certain individuals in my life, I realized that not only did it not just start in 2020, okay, it was made apparent in 2020, but that even certain dynamics that happened from the time I was a child, growing up, and the people who were around me during that time when I was growing up were placed there, or I was placed in that environment so that I would have a lot of maybe self-doubt, insecurities, and all of these kind of negative and lower vibrational feelings about myself or about the world or whatever, okay? A lot of pessimism, etc. Like, you know, projected onto me from the individuals whom I was around, so that I would view the world that way. And therefore, that would, you know, supposedly have held me back from maturing spiritually. But the fact that I also left the States, I was, you know, I'm a New Yorker. I left New York and I came to the Mediterranean. That kind of flipped the switch because, number one, anyone who, you know, you don't have to leave the country to know, you know, the New York lifestyle is a very hectic, very overbearing sometimes, you know, way of living. And then to come to an area that's a little bit more laid back, the distractions are not going to be the same. The pressures and the stressors are not going to be the same. So in my opinion, in the experiences that I've had, it's almost as if the Matrix has had to really work harder to give me the amount of distractions necessary to provoke the fear that was necessary to kind of, you know, try to keep me back spiritually, okay? Versus, I've always said this, if I had been in the New York till this day, I probably wouldn't have even noticed half of these synchronicities and all of these truths and all of these things going on. So possibly I wouldn't have had to maybe experience the amount of targeting or resistance or gang stalking that I've experienced, right, in these past couple of years. So this concept of how long does it last also depends on how you are focusing your attention on it. So every day I go out, and the more you learn, also you have to think that with routine, a lot of these NPCs, entities, whatever you want to call them, they work in a kind of loop. And if you're very close to God, if you are praying, if you are nourishing yourself spiritually with affirmations, meditation, and doing all of the spiritual work that's necessary, okay, it's not to say that it's just going to stop, because obviously you are now like a abnormality in this system, right? So you're always going to see these kind of resistances because you're still dynamic, you're still growing little by little, and you're outgrowing this system. But you can be able to manage it. You can be able to continue to bend the energy in your favor, okay? Because what it is kind of like a war for your mind. The Matrix is still going to try to attempt to bend the energy into the direction, you know, pulling you into the distractions or the narratives that favors it, okay, to function. And therefore, you have to really focus and make sure you keep your energy grounded and on the things that you're interested in doing and what you really want. Okay, so this is the most important thing. And I would say also that for the most part, if you already know what's going on, you're never going to be able to unsee what you see. You're never going to be able to unsee the synchronicities, the glitches, and all of these things, because you have already awoken. So it is something that necessarily is not going to just stop because, you know, you gain a certain level spiritually or anything like this. It's something that is consistent and that you will always have to make sure you're working on, because you are awoken in the Matrix. And that's all I wanted to say about this topic.